Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever Behind the Artist podcast with me, Sophie Skelton. I founded Behind the Artist back in March of 2023, interviewing an array of fantastic pioneering artists, providing an insight behind the artist's work. I am fascinated by learning the process of how one's imagination can transpire into a work of art and become a masterpiece, treasured by society for years to come. I will discover the highs of pursuing their passion as a career and explore the challenges they may endure as an artist in modern society. To announce my guest, the fabulous emerging artist Gail Reid. Gail has recently been on the semi-finals of Portrait Artist of the Year. She captures the character of her sitters through the careful studies of their posture and clothing, within the overall composition creating a likeness true to the individual. Her work is thoughtful and she celebrates the human body through her nude portraits. Embracing the natural form, Gail also produces landscapes and still lifes. Hello, Gail, and how are you doing today?
Hello, Sophie. I'm very happy to be here. I'm really honoured to be your first, I won't say victim, your first podcast person. I love watching you. I've loved following your journey. It's been really quick. You've gone from zero to this already. It's wonderful. I'm so grateful for everything that you do to champion contemporary artists. You've got loads of my favourites on your website. So I'm just chuffed to be part of it. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome, and I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about really is Sky Portrait Artist of the Year. And how did that come about, and what did you gain from doing that?
So how it came about, I was part of I don't know if you've heard of, there's a Strada Easel challenge. So there's a challenge, I think it's twice a year, and you can be in a draw to win a Strada Easel, and you have to paint from life every day for a month and hashtag it and stuff. I was a bit stuck for what to do that day, having done a few days of it. So I decided to do a self-portrait, which I thought I could string out over a few days. And as long as you change the picture and you're working from life, it's fine. It counts. I got a mirror out of the bathroom, stuck it there on that table and just painted. And I've got several friends who are avid followers of the show. Yesterday, and my friend Debbie, who was there in the audience, and they've said a few times, why don't you enter? So I did. And then I was right here when I got the call. And I didn't really realise. I thought they were saying you've been shortlisted, or you're in with a chance. And this person from, I think it was from Story Vault, just carried on talking, and then after a minute or two, I said, do you mean I'm actually going to be in the show? She said, yes, congratulations. And that was just the beginning of a really amazing, and it was a roller coaster of practice, learning about. Obviously you have to be on a non-disclosure agreement so that you don't spoil it for people. All this.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful. Yeah. So that was my journey into it.
What did you feel then when you first got in there? How did you feel? Did you feel nervous or were you excited?
I was a bit nervous, yeah. I think we probably all were. But I try and channel that as hyper attention. I try, if I'm nervous, I try and, I know it sounds a bit corny, but a bit of positive self-talk and come on, you've got this kind of. And also, it really didn't feel like we were competing against each other. We were conscious that essentially, in many ways, it's an entertainment show. And we're just part of this big. There are obviously the judges, the sitters, the audience, the staff, and so it's all at one big kind of team. So you don't really. I don't know about the other competitors, but I didn't really feel like I was competing. But I'm always a bit nervous when I'm doing a portrait because I always want to be true to the person, but you don't want to upset people. So
No, I think that's the thing as well, especially when it's a public figure or a celebrity. Did you feel that sort of added pressure for the fact that it was a celebrity that was coming in?
I did. I was a bit worried about not knowing who they were, because I don't want to tell him because of rubbish memory. Yeah, so I was a bit nervous about that, but I'd done so much practice, Sophie. All my friends had been wheeled in. They didn't know why. I've got loads of portraits of done in 4 hours, and they didn't ask any questions. They just came and sat. So I just went into that. I just went into my pattern that I'd practiced so many times. And it was actually easier because I wasn't having to give them cups of tea and look after
Yeah.
them. So really, it was easier.
Yeah, I think the thing is as well is that obviously on Portrait Artist of the Year, you get 4 hours to create that piece of work. And I imagine that there will probably be distractions within that time, so like recordings and stuff. So do you think that I've had to adapt your process a bit to fit in with that time scale?
Yes, they were very forthcoming with information in advance. So we knew what we were going to have in terms of equipment and supplies, and we will watch the show so we can see that you're being interviewed and nothing. So I think it goes with the territory. And but so you can, if you're not being filmed, you can carry on painting in the breaks, which doesn't completely compensate for the interviews and
Yeah.
stuff, but it means it's nearer to 4 hours. So it's not far off 4 hours. Incredible fun though, just
Yeah.
amazing, just such a great thing to be part of. Yeah.
And painting a Spice Girl as well.
No, putting Emma Bunton in hell. That's what I did.
I know, I loved the fact that you said you turned around at one point and you said it was an accident that I've done it like this, but it looked amazing. And yeah, when it was revealed, I thought, yes, this is really good. Obviously, we can see it in the back of
Yeah.
your studio now. And actually, this brings me on to the fact of we had a bit of a conversation about facial recognition and looking at people. And what I want to know is when you're walking down the street, for example, or you're in a supermarket, do you ever look at people and think you'd be a really good painting or anything like that?
Always, yeah. Even before I did, even when I was a computer programmer, I used to do that all the time. I'm fascinated by faces, facial structure, and I've never quite had the nerve to go up to someone and said, "Can I paint you?" But I did witness Curtis doing that. I was in a cafe with Curtis, and he saw someone walk down the road, and it was just a random with a nice beard and a backpack, and he did look quite interesting. And Curtis just said, "Hang on a minute," and he ran over. So like chat gave him his card. I thought I need to start doing that because that was a really good. And I think generally people, I imagine people. I don't know, how would you feel if someone came up to you and said, "Can I draw you?"
In a way, I think I'd feel flattered that they wanted to that they wanted to pay me. I have gone up to someone before actually. I was in a Italian restaurant where I live and I saw the chef and I thought, oh, be such a good drawing. And I just went up to him and I just said, please can I just take some pictures of you because I really want to draw you. And I said, I'll give you my drawing after. I said, I just think that you've got the look of being a good drawing. And I think that's interesting about being creative is the fact that you're constantly looking for things to draw, things to create, and people that look interesting. And so I think as well, artists seem to really pay attention to things perhaps more than people that aren't creative, constantly paying attention to the world. What do you look for in a potential sort of face to paint?
That's a really good question. So really, although I do look at people, I look at people and I look at the, I cannot imagine an uninteresting face. I honestly can't imagine seeing anyone that I didn't want to draw. Even if someone's face is just interesting by virtue of being so very average, for the sake of our. So obviously, if someone's got an extraordinary feature, or they're asymmetrical in some way, or whatever, then that's something you can really. That's something eye-catching that you can make something of in the portrait. But yeah, I really can't. And people do say, oh, for example, Emma Bunton, that she's a very beautiful, smooth-skinned person. But even that, I think that in itself is interesting. People have still got bone structure. She's still got that interesting jaw. I had one sitter who she was in my studio and she found the amount of, I mean, there was quite a lot of visual noise in the studio and she found that too much. And so she just shut her eyes. And I just drew her with her eyes shut. So if you're open to the individuals, what they volunteer, usually they volunteer something either physically, unintentionally, or actually they'll say,
Yeah.
can you make me?
Yes, yeah. I guess my next thing is, how did you get into portraiture? Because you started off with soft toy commissions while you were living in Dubai for 3 years. So how did you go from making them commissions to becoming a portrait artist?
So I've always wanted to do it. So all my life, I've always wanted to be an artist, but I took the sensible path because I found maths quite easy. I decided to do that. So I had the kind of career in IT going, but that meant that I could do night classes and learn etching and life drawing and things like that. So then when we got to Dubai, I thought, if I don't do it now, because I was there on a non-working visa, so we were there for my husband's work. We had the kids with us, so there wasn't a lot of spare time. But I thought, if I don't do it now, it's not going to happen. So this is I said I brought you I brought Soggy Rabbit.
Oh, brilliant. I love that.
He was then 2 years old. He smells a lot better now than he used to smell, but he was called Soggy Rabbit because Tom used to chew his ears. And, so I painted him. This is one of the drawings. So this is the Soggy Rabbit. You probably got it there. So that was a drawing of Soggy Rabbit, and then there's a lot of obviously an expat Facebook community. And I think I posted that, and then someone said, "Oh wow, I love it. Can you do my child's toy?" And before I knew it, I had a long order list. And what I really liked about it was that it's still portrait practice because toys have still got structure, a very distinctive look, each one.
Yeah.
And the children, they know their toys. There's millions of these Jellycat rabbits, but each one, look, it's their one. And so as far as I was concerned, I was just monetizing my drawing practice basically. And so that was Soggy Rabbit. But it also helped me learn about business, like sort of a little bit about marketing. And when I came back to the UK, I set up a website and started an Instagram account. So it was always my intention to do serious art, if that's the right word. And I always saw it as a funnel in a sense, whilst I really enjoyed doing it. And the they can be used to represent all sorts of things, toys. You know, if you put them next to each other, we were talking off camera about anthropomorphism. You can express a lot with a soft toy, and I had some really touching commissions around that, the symbolism of the soft toy. But it transfers. Here we are. That was about 2016, I think I started, and now I've got 2 commissions for portraits from life, which have both come originally from people who were Soggy Rabbit customers.
I think that's really interesting, and I think the fact that you've gone from that and the fact that it's linked into what you're doing now. Would you say that you like having objects in your paintings? Because I know that, for example, in your submission for Portrait Artist of the Year, that obviously had objects in the background that were sentimental to you or meant something. And would you say that you like to include things in a portrait and not just say the head, for example? Is that something you like doing?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Sophie. I do. Yes. So really, I love just observation and looking at how light hits things, and whether it's a person or a rubbish bin, or a £10 note, or there are certain things that I say rubbish bin because I've got a rubbish bin just there that's nice and shiny.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I like texture, shiny things, and things that have. So the reason I quite like money as a subject, like notes, is because it's been touched by people and passed around, and it's a sort of a thing that you, even if you see a corner, you know what it is. If there's a tiny bit, if you're lucky enough to have a tiny bit poking out from under your keyboard, it's got that kind of familiarity. So I do like objects and creatures and overlapping and shadows and things. And I think that they give context to their portrait. But I feel as though, really, for the last few years, I've been cutting my teeth doing separate still lifes and landscapes and portraits. And now, what I really want to do is bring them all together,
Yeah.
putting things like putting objects in portraits. It's part of that, starting to try and create. Some people say narrative paintings. I've tried to think of it more as like situations that are identifiable.
I reckon that for some people, going to, for example, being on TV, having a film set and everything being on you all the time, that could have added a bit more pressure and made you feel a bit more uncomfortable compared to your studio where you're on your own, you have your own rules and everything.
Yes, yes, you're not performing.
Yes,
Whereas when you're,
yeah,
even if you're doing a commission in your studio and it's someone there, there is an element of performance in terms of, if you're there going, oh God, that's awful, how am I going to fix this? Then it's not fair on them. Even if you're thinking that, you have to control it.
So, where do you find your inspiration? Sort of what inspires you?
So a lot that people, ideas. I'm quite often inspired by, say, a challenge, whether that's an open call or a competition or a portrait artist of the year or like that easel, Strada easel.
Yeah,
So I am. I quite like constraints in a way. It's nice if someone sets you a challenge and then you can, within that boundary, start to stretch things. But then sometimes I'll just see something like a snail and just think, wow, that looks really cool. And so, yeah, and then also other people's work comes up a lot where I see other people's things they've done and think that's really clever, or that's really, yeah.
yeah.
I wonder if I could do that. Like the master copies, I think are really a great thing to do, a great way to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because when you get an idea that comes into your head or you see something, do you like to do it straight away? Do you think I'm going to have to get this down on paper, or I'm going to have to paint it? Or would you say that your process is slower and you save the ideas? How do you work?
The first one. Definitely. Yeah, yeah. So definitely, yeah, that's it. I'm pretty impulsive, and I do sometimes quite late at night. I might just start something and just still be there and get up early in the morning and carry on with it. But yeah, and I think living in a busy house with lots of other demands on my time, I do have to be quite okay with interruptions. And yeah, and so I have to, and I'm not the best completer finisher, but I find with videoing things or recording or live streaming or anything like that does bring me into the moment and force me to progress through the
Yeah,
thing. But
yeah.
yeah.
How long would you say that it takes you to complete a painting, for example?
It depends. So, like that, obviously, that was 4 hours. You saw that took 4 hours. That was 4 hours. That one there, that was, I would probably say that was maybe 40 hours, very roughly, maybe more. So, it depends on the size, depends on the situation. I do work pretty quickly, I think, because I like to have stuff fresh looking and not too worked. Yeah, so it can be anything. So, live in a live drawing group, sometimes they're 30-second poses, which is really great. And then after you've done a few 30-second ones, the 5-minute ones feel like ages.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, they do. Yeah, and I think the thing that I enjoyed about watching Portrait Artist of the Year was seeing you actually paint and seeing your process, and the fact that you had this massive canvas and you just got a big brush and you just went straight in to the painting. You covered the whole canvas, and I think obviously sometimes that's a good way to start, because it's like you've not got like this white canvas in front of you just staring. You've actually got the base of it, and I think, yeah, that was quite interesting to see. And then I guess next thing would be, out of the interviews that I've done on here, do you think that there's been certain ones that have resonated with you, or that you think, oh, I would really like to try that, or yeah, I think their work is amazing?
Wow, it's quite hard to keep up with them because they're coming thick and fast, aren't they, Sophie?
All the time.
Well, so I find it's a bit like going into a sweet shop, going into Behind the Artist. I just go in and have a dabble around and look at people. Obviously, there are some that I particularly personally like. I like the work of Kayun. I'm a big fan of Kayun's work, and Laura Hope. And so there's quite a few you've got on there who I really like. It's just nice to go into their world and see what's different and what's common, between what I do and what they like to do. And I think people they're very honest about their. I think maybe the questions that you ask elicit quite a lot of.
Yeah, I like to get behind them. I guess that's why I called it Behind the Artist, because I wanted to really ask these deep questions to actually bring back the layers, take it pure back to the canvas of a person,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
to sort of see what they're like, what the process is, what they're thinking. And yeah, I think that in some of the interviews there has been that sort of sense of vulnerability there, and I think it is quite interesting to see people's processes. And also it's great for artists like yourself, because you can especially say, when I ask what's your greatest achievements been, or what have your greatest challenges been, I think when you're an artist and you can see, oh, I've been through that challenge as well. So you can see that people are in the similar sort of situation to yourself. So yeah, no, that's great. Obviously, Kayum was on Portrait Artist of the
yeah.
Year
It was a
as
semi-final.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, there is actually quite a few people that I've interviewed that are on Portrait Artist of the Year. They have a great selection on there. I
yeah.
love going through it. I love watching them. What do you think makes a good piece of art?
I think it has to be. I know this is a really cheesy word that's horribly overused, but authentic. So I think the work
Yeah.
has to be an expression of something from that is true to the artist's own experience of the world. Um, and I think that personally, I like things with structure. And I am a lover of craft, so actual craft like knitting and crochet, but also just technical skill. So personally, I buy the odd painting, and I buy for technique as much as subject. So if I see someone's caught something, I bought a Julie Dunster painting where I could just see, even though it's Instagram, she'd managed to balance the desaturated colour of against a spot of light that just made the light glow. And I thought maybe it's the backlit screen that's doing that. And I had to buy it just to find out.
Yeah.
And I just love it. And the further away you get from it, the more it glows. I don't care what the subject was. I'm just fascinated by that little. And I suppose to come back to your question about what motivates you to do a painting, it can be something like that. It can be a little thing that really catches your eye, and then out comes hopefully something that reflects that. Quite often not, but it's just fun of the journey.
That's interesting, because I guess as well is that, you know, art, I think, is really interesting in the fact that someone can absolutely love a painting, and another person could come and completely think the opposite. And I think
Yeah,
that's what's quite interesting, is that it's your own personal, it's your feeling. So art makes you feel something, and whether that is feeling happy or feeling sad or remembering a feeling that you've had before. I think that's a really good thing about art, is that it's subjective. And when we're thinking about art and the fact that obviously some people look at art in a different way, how do you think that's in like a modern society? How has that affected you as an artist? Do you think that in society now you have to be more careful with what you make, or do you think that there's like more constraints as an artist?
Well, there's a lot of, with social media and globalization, there are a lot of conversations that are had maybe out in public now, hooray, that were not had or suppressed or had in private. I think that's really good. And I think it's right to be careful. I think we should all be careful while still being authentic. And I think there's a real interesting thing that happens when you see something that perhaps it's really interesting to look at, where does that come from? Why am I outraged by that? And why does that make me want to paint? And sometimes art therapy is a very kind of, well, I don't know, I'm not an art therapist, but I've occasionally used art to kind of express something that I haven't been able to say with words, or if I haven't been able to communicate with someone. But I think it's very interesting to look at old work through our contemporary lens and consider the context, look at what we can learn. There's taste changes, and taste is informed by the world. So I think it's right that people who perhaps have in the past had the upper hand should now feel uncomfortable, and should now have a go at feeling uncomfortable, should now maybe sit and ask themselves, is that an exploitative thing to put on my canvas? Is that, if I don't fall into this group, should I represent that group? Is that right or wrong? I'm not coming up with answers, but what I'm saying is I think when we lived in Dubai, I saw a lot of people treading on eggshells, trying to earn a living and not being quite sure where they stood. And as the European expat community, we probably had a lot more liberty and support than a lot of other people working there did. And I think it's right that people who've not felt on solid ground, who've perhaps been offended by a statue and haven't felt able to say, now A, feel able to say, and B, the people who are making those, perhaps have that power, are now feeling a bit uncomfortable and not quite sure.
Yeah, and I think I think it's interesting because in a way now, if you say disagree with something, or on the other hand you think something's great, you can make a piece of art about it. And I think that's a good thing about art, is that you can express your emotions, you can express your views through art. And I think that's why it's good, because, and that again is why some people, especially political art, some people will love it because that's what they believe in, and other people won't.
Yeah, yes, and to do it without shooting each other is really
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
without
and I think
violence is a good thing.
if there was a gallery that you were aspire to be in, which one would it be?
Which gallery would I aspire to be in? I would like to be in a gallery which was free to enter, and where there was institutional baggage. Obviously, the Mal galleries, to get in the Mal galleries is a great thing, whether it's under the umbrella of one of the Federation of British Artists institutions. That makes me very happy. So I'm very happy to go in there. And I don't think it's free to go in as a punter. So I've immediately contradicted myself. I think to be collected by a national institution is an honour, and it is part of having a legacy. So that's a dream that one day. But I suppose my journey is probably more around being in contact with people in the real world. So it's more, I've got a couple of conferences coming up, which I'll bore you about maybe later. But yeah, but to be in a context where Oh, here's an example. I loved what Curtis Holder did in the National Theatre. So that's not a gallery. It's a theatre. They have
Yeah.
space there. He was resident there and responding to the people in there and produced work. And that's shown there. So it comes into the awareness of people who haven't trotted along to a gallery and gone to look at art. So I think that's probably I like that sort of thing where at the other end of the scale, a doctor's surgery. I have shown work in a doctor's surgery. And there you've got
Yeah.
a chance maybe to connect with or brighten the day of somebody who's not really come to look at art. So that's probably, but also I love just being out on the street painting somewhere, and people come and talk to you who they're not. Some of them come and they tell you about their own painting journey, but also people just come and they talk about the place and they say, "Oh, I love how you've got that in there because my granny did blah blah blah," that sort
Yeah.
of thing. So yeah, I probably, whilst it's very exciting to be part of a gallery, and that whole galleries do a huge amount uh, for artists. And I would never grudge a gallery their commission because I've seen how hard they.
I think one of the things that I found really interesting was that in the National Gallery and the big galleries, a few years ago, only 2% of the artists that were in there were female artists. And obviously now they are striving to add more female artists. And I guess that might be another reason as well why you would want to go into somewhere that's perhaps not a gallery and you want to go into, say, the theatre, because obviously it's still an issue that women can't seem to get into the galleries as much as men. And I guess
Yeah.
and it's something that I really think that needs to be changed. I'm really into sort of promoting women in art because I still think that we don't get the same recognition as, for example, a man in art. And if you look back in history and you look at the pieces of work that were created by women that were big in their time, like we don't learn about them at school. We don't learn about women artists. We just learn about Van Gogh or Monet, and I think that's something that. Do you think being a woman artist, you feel like you need to put that message out there that my work does deserve to be shown?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of conditioning around that you receive as a girl growing up around things like in the workplace, about the extent to which a young adult, as a young adult myself, I was always very careful with job interviews. I never wanted to oversell myself. I was always that my worst fear would be to have overstated my capabilities on my CV. And then, I mean, we're dealing with generalizations, but I think possibly that's something that applies in art as well. And I possibly might not try for things because I might think I'm not quite good enough yet. That sort of dialogue, it can be gendered, if that's the right word. But I think there's a huge amount that can be done by people who, for example, the first kind of oil painting course I went on, this was a copy of a Judith Leyster painting. So Judith Leyster was a contemporary of Frans Hals, I believe. And I'd never heard of her before. But it was Maestro Michael John Angel who runs the Angel Academy in Florence, which is a sort of Atelier Academy Florence school, and where lots of great artists have trained, Cesar Santos and people like that. So he did a workshop in Belfast for 2 weeks every year. I don't know if he still does it. And a friend put me onto that, so I thought I'll go there and learn to paint. And we did master copies. And he put this one out, and this was long before the mainstream dialogue on women art, while we were all feeling like, not really, but nobody had really coined it yet that had come into my sphere. I'm sure there were people. And I just feel so grateful that he could have chosen all sorts of master paintings, but he put that in front of his relatively small class of amateur artists. And he showed us and he said, this is Judith Laister. A lot of her work was misattributed. She's since been more appreciated. And it was just offered to us as one of the ones to copy. And I think things like that have such an impact. So as well as the galleries, and I totally agree, and there is wonderful work being done to hold people to account and hold their collection. And the faster they do it, the better. But I think on a small scale, people can do that. So I was always, that was the first time it really came onto my radar was Judith Laister. And it was just a good story of, oh, right, I see, that's been happening. And you don't even know, you're so used to it, you don't even question it. Especially when it's in that context, it was an older male teacher saying, look, this is happening. I just thought that was great.
Yeah, I do think that it is starting to change. And I guess what I would say is, who would you, if you could spend a day in a studio with anyone, could be any artist, who would you want to spend it with? And why would you want to spend it with them?
Jenny Savile. Jenny Savile, yeah,
Yes.
really. Oh my goodness, she's an absolute tower in my. I love her manner. I think she's really just grounded, serious, and serious grafter. Produced amazing work, incredibly knowledgeable, and I just love her work right the way the whole journey. I just think she's fantastic. Tracy Emin as well. I think she,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to watch Laura Hope work. I'd love to see her drawings and how she does that. There's quite a lot of people I'd just like to see how they do it, but if I had to pick one, it would be Jenny Savile. Mm.
I think it's interesting that because when I was doing my A levels, we had the head of art, she was called Alice, and she was she just absolutely loved Jenny Savile's work. And what happened was is when we were doing, say, studies of artists, and I think a lot of other schools around the area were studying like the Van Gogh or and she was very much, these are the female artists they are great at what they do. And we studied, say, Jenny Savile,
Mm.
Jenny Dutton, all these different people. And yeah, I just think she's got a really interesting sort of narrative to her paintings as well. And the way that she paints is very raw and vulnerable, but it's very unique to her. And I think that's why as well she's a great artist study, because there's a lot that you can gain by looking at her work.
Yes, and I think she does stand on the shoulders of giants as well. I think she has a good grounding in and I guess at a time when it was possibly not considered very cool. When she was part of the Young British Artists, I'm not sure knowing your Rembrandt from your Velasquez was living.
What I'm going to ask you now then is, what events do you have coming up? Have you got anything in the pipeline?
Thank you. Yes, I've got. So this year, as the year finishes, I'm really trying to stop doing commissions from photos so I stopped Soggy Rabbit. That was part of the journey. And I think taking commissions from photos has been great for teaching me, but I'm moving that to one side as the year draws to a close, and looking more for work from life and to produce my own work. So this year coming, 2024, I'm trying to do more paintings of situations, things like the squid painting, which sold, otherwise I'd be able to show you, but it's and more things like this industry painting, and bring together all those elements. To which end, I'm very excited to be, there's an event which I can't disclose the actual event, but an International Women's Day event in March, where I'll be on a panel and exhibiting work. So work around that theme, which I'm really looking forward to mulling over and doing. Ready. And then in June, I'm going to be the artist at the Appearance Matters conference, which
Oh,
is,
that's amazing.
I know, I'm so excited. So we went to look at the venue. It's huge. So there's no limit to how big my canvases could be. I haven't got a studio big enough to fit what I could potentially do. So that's around the Centre for Appearance Research at the University of the West of England is a internationally renowned centre where they seek to research and contribute to the lives of people living with visible differences. And then, so I met them through Dr. Nicholas Stock, who was a TEDx speaker in the same in the Bristol TEDx.
Yeah.
So that's how we came into contact with each other, and so that's led on to that. So I'm really looking forward to doing some paintings around that theme. But we were talking about being careful and being mindful of not fetishizing difference. And yeah, those are my two main things. And then I really loved the open studio that I did at the end of the year. So I'll either look to maybe do an exhibition in a gallery, but I haven't got anything planned for that for the end of the year, or just hold an open studio and then put out some of the work that's more personal, like still lives and things like that.
I think that's amazing. It's very exciting. And what I've got now is I've got a couple of questions off some fellow artists. There is one person who I think you're quite close friends with, which is David Crook.
Oh yes.
And he's
Yeah.
actually messaged me, and he actually said, which I thought was quite interesting, that he said that you were responsible for getting him, basically you were responsible for introducing him to his now partner, which
Yeah. Very
which I
friend, but now one. Yeah.
and yeah, I thought that was lovely. And basically this is what he said to me. So he said, Gail, you are married, have 3 teenage children, a large house, paint regularly, do all your own IT for your website and shop, attend exhibitions in London, and have taken part in Portrait Artist of the Year. How on earth do you do it all? Is it a superhuman inner strength, strict time management, dogged determination, or some other power us mortals don't possess?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Sophie, for relaying that. I don't think I've got any magic spice. I don't do anything brilliant. I think I've had to reconcile myself. Not that I ever had high standards of housework or anything like that, but I have to reconcile myself with things not being perfect, both in terms of parenting and all that. I had to give up choir, which I really enjoyed, so I've had to cut some things out. And I don't have great time management, but I don't drink, which means I'm very fresh in the morning and I don't need much sleep.
Yeah.
So those two things, and I try and keep reasonably fit, but yeah, I think those things just allow me to get as much out of the day as I possibly can. And also interruptions. I just have to be able to cope with interruptions and keep lots of balls. I tend to start the day with a sense of things that I want to get done, or start the week or the year, and then any time there's a chance to progress one of them, I progress it. But it's
Yeah.
not a magic thing. Yeah, and I see from the outside, lots of people look like they're doing that. And yeah, I'm sure it's all very messy in the background. But
Yeah, I think the thing is that when you're on social media, you can put a finished work up, you can record whatever you want to put up, and it's selective. And what people don't see is what goes on behind the scenes and the process. And I think, and obviously it's the same in not just with artists, but in other situations where I think sometimes people can think, oh, that painting, it probably didn't take that long to create because they've only seen the final product of it.
yeah,
Whereas actually they're not seeing that whole process.
I don't know about your personal circumstances, except what you've put on there. I can see you're obviously very young, and somehow you seem to be incredibly astute about you've got this, your website and your notion of doing these interviews, which I believe comes from a very altruistic place. But in terms of productivity, oh my goodness, it's just gone boom. And then next thing you're doing a competition, a portrait competition. And it's fantastic because you don't seem to have you've got a clean slate, you've got none of the baggage of historic sponsorship, you're not an institution. Presumably you don't have a back room full of people doing your IT and doing your all that.
No.
And all the other things that you're talking about doing. It's incredible. How do you do it?
Oh, thank you very much, Gail. I think the thing is, I've always had this massive passion for art, and whether that is creating it or reading about it, especially reading artist interviews, it's something I've always been interested in. And I think that you make time for the things that you're interested in. And if you really want to do something, which is, I was sat in, I think it was in February this year, and I was thinking, what am I going to do? I was at the time in between a job. I'm full-time employed now, but I was in between a job, and I was just thinking, I really want to do something to do with art. And I was in the car and I was just like, I know what I'm going to do. And I'm going to message these artists and I'm just going to say to them, I really want to do an interview with you, and I'm going to see what they respond. And basically, I managed to get these artists to come on, and it just took off from there. And obviously, I've managed to build it up. I mean, I do it all, when I have my free time. So, like on a night when I've come back
Yeah.
from my day job. And I just think because I've got so much enthusiasm for it that I really dedicate a lot of my time to it. And that's why, as well, as a person, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
very ambitious person. And I've always, once I've got something, so for example, all I wanted to do was the interviews, and I wanted to get as many artists as I could really, to do the interviews. And then I got to a point where these interviews are going really well. What can I do next? And then I thought I could do a competition, and that way it's including more artists, potential for more things. And obviously now I've always liked speaking on camera. I'm a singer. I like performing, and I've always loved listening to podcasts. I was like, the next sort of thing that I want to do is to
Yeah.
do the podcast as well. And basically, to be fair, in terms of organization, I am unorganized, but in my own organized way, in my own organized fashion. I think I just try and make time for the things that I love doing. I am only 20, and I think sometimes, especially speaking to people that I've asked on interviews, I think I've assumed that I'm older. What I am, but I've done my A levels, and when I was doing them, I read an interview with, I think it was with Jenny Saville, and I read it, and then I studied her for a bit, and then I absolutely fell in love with Maggie Hambling's work. And I spent a year studying Maggie Hambling, literally looking through her interviews, watching them online and everything. And I was like, I would absolutely love to one day interview Maggie Hambling myself. And I guess that's another inspiration for doing what I'm doing now.
Incredibly capable at moving obstacles out of the way. Just watching you set up this podcast. I can't believe it was only February that you started the interviews, but watching between us when we've been preparing
Yeah.
for the podcast, watching the way you just brought in lots of knowledge from all different places, and then you've got the software, you've got the everything sorted. It's like you just seem to have a talent for moving detritus out of the way, or obstacles. It's the perfect sort of ambition, the ambition to do, not to just put yourself on top of the pile. The ambition to get an idea off the ground is phenomenal. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I think the good thing is that about the behind the artist is the whole point of doing it is to actually put the artist out there. And because I come from a creative household, and I think it's seeing someone that is perhaps maybe not as well known, or but doing an absolutely amazing job at what they're doing, or have an incredible skill, and actually really putting a spotlight on them. I think as well, a lot of artists are from down south like yourself, and sometimes it's when you're up north, you don't get the opportunities as opposed to being in London, which is obviously where all the galleries are. And so I think what I'm trying to do, and especially next year, is turn it around a bit and
Yeah.
get people from down south to come up north and exhibit up north. And I think that is what I'd like to do, because there are so many great artists, especially up here, and I think that they just don't seem to get the same sort of opportunities. And I'd quite like to bridge that gap, I
Yeah.
think.
Yes. Yes, I've noticed a few things I've been involved in. There have been artists who've come and they've said, "Oh, I've got to go back now. I'm going back to Glasgow." Or it's like, "Oh my goodness!" So just, even though
Yeah.
London feels quite a long way to me, and I'm only in Bristol, but oh my god, yeah. And I think there are a lot of people who really also. I'm very up for going up, and yeah, I think you're in the perfect position to, now you've got that traction to then lift everyone up north.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's great because you can just, why not? Why not just do it? It's like it just waits. These things just wait for someone to have the initiative and capability to just do it. And then it's amazing when you do it, how many people just come up, here they all are, we're all there. We're all there
Yeah.
cheering you on, sitting on the sidelines, keen to help and appreciating the motive behind what you're doing. It's so great.
Oh, that was lovely. It's been really great to hear more about your work and about how your personal life feeds into how you work. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. I really appreciate it. It's so lovely to talk to you. I love the interest that you take, the sincere interest in the detail and the big picture. I can't wait to see more of this podcast. Like, I think we all listen to podcasts when we're painting, a lot of us. And I can't wait. I can imagine you're going to be inundated, and there are going to be such fascinating ones. Once you've got this, my first clunky or fruit out of the way, there'll be some really interesting people. I can't wait to see all the people that you have, and I'm really honoured to be on here. So thank you so
Oh,
much.
oh, you're very welcome. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much, Gail. And yes, so that concludes this first ever Behind the Artist podcast. So I will look forward to speaking with the next artist. And yeah, thank you.